Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Data and AI Summit. Thank you. I know this is a very early talk, and a lot of you are probably quite jet-lagged at the moment, so I appreciate it. That is a lot of energy, given the sort of circumstances. So welcome to this very early talk to basically talk about what else you should go and see at Data and AI Summit this year. There are over 700 talks this year, and I hope this kind of whittles down what's worth seeing. For each talk I'm about to recommend, there is a QR code to go with it. Some of these will come up as already booked. For context, this talk was fully booked this morning. There are still seats. So just make a note of it. You can stand in the standby line and then you'll be allowed to go in. Especially for some of the big talks as well, you might want to camp outside the room. And when people inevitably don't show up, you can get their slots. So I want to start by talking about the curse of the Brickster, Databricks employee, or rather the curse of the customer-facing technical Brickster. The average person that we speak to uses but isn't necessarily happy with our features. If you think about it, the people who like the feature and can use them, you never see them again. They kind of skip off into the sunset having a great time. So by definition, the people that we spend our time talking to are the ones with very, very high demands on our products and what they want it to do next. So something like this. So I need to use features to use Azure Backbone, IPv6 on GCPC with 9 nines of uptime, and the data can never leave Switzerland. So when it comes to knowing what Databricks does and doesn't do, we know. So I hope this is going to give you like a very honest look into Databricks, what people like, where the opportunities for improvement are, what's being actively developed on, and then you can go and learn more about that. I also do want to add a bit of a scoop disclaimer as well. So all of these things are technically public, but they might have been written in a very vague way. So with that in mind, if you see something that you think is a bit of a scoop today, I'm going to ask very nicely that you don't post it on social media straight away, or I'll never be allowed to do a talk like this ever again. And if you also see anyone with a blue lanyard, that means that they are press, and I would really like it if you could snitch anyone out. I don't think I can see anyone, so we should be fine. They shouldn't be in this room anyway, but yes. So let's start off with some fighting words, and let's talk about one of my most hated things about Databricks, and that is Community Edition. If you've never used Community Edition before, I don't blame you. Show of hands if you've ever used Community Edition. Yeah, no one's enthusiastically raising their hands, are they? So once upon a time, it used to be the way to start doing a personal project in Databricks. But for some reason, it was deprioritized for year after year. And it looks nothing like the full product at the moment. I would call Community Edition kind of a second-class citizen, but let's be clear, it is so much worse than that. And this is a real problem because people are wanting to learn. It's not just people who want to upskill on their resume, it's university students, it's hackathons, it's training days, and let's be clear, it's better than it was, but there are still like a learning curve in some areas when it comes to using Databricks. And basically, all of these problems, just stop hitting yourself. So wouldn't it be great, hypothetically, if we put a project manager in charge of Databricks and task them with coming up with new and improved Community Edition? And that's exactly what we did. Will Valori is the man for the job, and he has spent the last few quarters improving the experience dramatically on Community Edition. So very briefly, what does this entail? So the idea is that you should be able to try any Databricks feature. The DevRel team, the team that I'm part of, we push quite hard to make sure that you can try everything. So for example, jobs, if you're following like a tutorial from DB Demos, if you're trying to recreate some training material, you should have the availability to use these things. The limits for this week are slightly lower, but I think they are going to have like a daily credit allowance rather than like a big chunk for a month. So if you get to the end of the day, you realize you've shot over, there's no kind of like slowdown in momentum. You can still sign on the next day and hopefully go for that. And also we were able to use it for our hackathon yesterday. So it is already in use. If you follow the right links, you can sort of get an early version of it at the moment. If you do have any questions about Community Edition, please go and ask Will, not me. It's not my feature. Okay, let's talk about something good. And that is, of course, Spark 4.0. This is the heroic effort that is happening as part of the Apache Spark community right now. I know this is down as good, but I really wish I had a category for absolutely flipping great. There is so much that is going on in this space right now. I counted either 10 talks about this in aggregate or as a Spark deep dive into features. I'm going to highlight some of my favorites in terms of features. If I didn't mention a particular area that you're interested in, please don't be discouraged. So the first one up is, oh, that's not what I thought was going to be first up. Never mind. Native plotting with Plotly. So at the moment, or previously to Spark 4.0, you had to mess around with different types of data frames if you wanted to use pandas data frames for plotting. Now you've got native plotting within Spark with Plotly. We also have polymorphic Python UDTFs. That doesn't mean anything to you. These are UDFs that allow you to return a table as an output of your function, rather than something like a column or a particular vector. We also have Spark Connect has had some massive improvements as well. If you are involved in putting Spark in places that don't normally have Spark, there is now a much thinner client in terms of the languages that you can use. This has been dramatically improved as well with support for things like Go and Rust as well. And then finally, my favorite section of this entire slide is streaming. There are some massive improvements that are going on here. I would call them quality of life improvements, but I don't think that really scratches the surface of just how good these features are. We've got transform with state. If you've ever done stateful streaming, you've come into flat map group with state and you've just wanted to cry because it's so difficult. Transform with state is the new version of that, which is a lot easier to use. We've also got things like improved checkpointing, so you'll get better performance. There's also things like improvements with the state store, not just in terms of the improvements of the speed, but the interoperability as well. So with that in mind, I had to whittle this down to 3 talks that I would recommend, and it ended up being these 3. If I've just shown you all those things on the screen and you're like, I don't know what any of those things are, I really recommend having the intro talk be the one on the left, which is What's New in Spark from Daniel and Wenchan. That is on Thursday at 12:30. If you are interested in some of these things, we've got some very niche specific questions. There is an AMA that Alison, Jules, and DB are doing later in the week. But if you can't make that for some reason, there is also a DevRel booth that is downstairs in the expo hall at the moment. We've got a stand dedicated to Spark, full of Spark experts. So if you do have particular questions about what's coming out in 4.0, then go ahead and have a look. If you are quite into the weeds with Spark, the DSV2 stuff is fascinating with a very wide reach and impact, and it has been a real community effort to make that happen. So if you are consider yourself kind of a super Spark expert, I really recommend Anton's talk for DSV2 in Spark. Well, that's enough positivity. Let's go back to trashing things. You know what was coming. It is the Marmite of Databricks products, and that is Delta Live Tables. The people who love it put it in everything, and the people who don't like it are not quiet. And I say this as someone who has an oil painting of Marmite in their house at home. Again, some teams love it. The number is going up over time of DLT users, not Marmite eaters. I have no data on Marmite. God, I sound like the crazy Marmite lady, don't I? I kind of am. In general, people who have to churn through astronomical amounts of pipelines if they're doing like a migration, and they can't spend time curating every single pipeline, DLT is an excellent option for you. And so whenever I speak to kind of consultants or people that do these kind of big lift and shifts, they love Delta Live Tables. Sorry, quick question. Who here has ever been part of a migration and migrating things to Databricks? Okay, now keep your hand up if you didn't run out of time and everything was to the standard you expected. Oh, literally no one. Okay. Delta Live Tables is an excellent candidate for that kind of thing, where you don't have the time to curate and perfect everything. Okay, what else do people say about Delta Live Tables? So if you need something that's kind of good enough, like if I'm doing something, I don't want to waste time doing it from scratch. You know, I could bake bread for my Marmite every day, but I don't. I get it from the shop. And if you're still dead set on detailed configs, then maybe this is not for you. Sometimes a pipeline does need that extra level of config, although as Databricks gets simpler and it does start being able to kind of optimize jobs in the background, this is becoming less and less true. We are seeing a little bit of a rise of people overwriting the default configs and just kind of making the performance a lot worse. So I'm hoping that is going down over time with the help of some other features that are going on as well. But in a cruel twist, it's also not, ooh, there we go. This is the Spark busy board for people who are, if you find yourself having to twiddle with absolutely everything and you're making your performance worse, I'm going to get your Spark config busy board like this. But yes, in a cruel twist, Delta Live Tables is not quite simple enough for people who are maybe coming at it from an analytics perspective. And so that can make it a little bit challenging. So hypothetically, maybe, wouldn't it be prudent, perhaps, to maybe invest significant engineering time into this? And then if you had, hypothetically, spent a lot of engineering time improving it, wouldn't you then update any big announcements of the biggest conference of the year? And so that's where I'm going to go and recommend this talk by Michael Armbrust and Sandy from engineering at Databricks. Declarative pipelines, simplifying data engineering workloads. Again, I don't want to give away too many spoilers about what's going on here, but I really, really recommend this talk to get the latest updates on what's going on there. There is also an AMA from Denny on Thursday at 2 p.m. So if you have any particularly tricky questions, please go and harangue him. Oh. What is going on here? Right, okay. So I want to talk about something that is now good, and that is Databricks on Databricks. We aggressively dog food our product at Databricks. And I have put this one in good, because from your perspective, this is really good. But unfortunately, the intense nature of the dog fooding means that it's not necessarily the most simple of processes internally. And so we do enforce this dog fooding, and we do get excellent feedback about where to improve. But the part that goes unsaid is that kind of like feedback process. I don't know if you, know at Databricks, but we have a very kind of like open and honest kind of culture, which means that any of this feedback does tend to be fairly quick and fairly full on. So I do want to recommend 2 talks for you today about how we've done these Databricks internal projects where we get people at Databricks to use Databricks. I know some of them have probably come up already that maybe they might be full. These ones are surprisingly not well highlighted at the moment, and I do really recommend that you go and do these. So the first one talk on the left is about our field AI assistant, and that's built on the Databricks agent framework. It scrapes data from all over the place, so things like our CRM, our Google Drive, but it also helps you do stuff like prep for your meetings and your proposals and draft things like outbound emails as well. So it's not going to replace your sales team, let's not be silly, but it is going to make things go faster, and it is going to help prevent kind of dud meetings and dud comms going out. The second one is when we were realizing we were spending a lot of money on competitor BI reporting tools, despite us having very similar capabilities. And that's how we forced hundreds of people at Databricks to use Databricks for the first time. So in the long run, this is good, but for the team, I imagine there were some fairly ugly moments in that process. And yes, these are both very good technical talks, but if you're also involved in improving processes within teams, this is also good from like an organizational behavior kind of perspective to attend these talks as well. Okay, so the next thing I would ask you, put it out to the audience to say what you don't like about Databricks, but fortunately Maria Vektomova has already beaten you to this by telling us quite publicly what she doesn't like. Don't worry, despite all this, she does still like the platform, but yeah, she's not a big fan of the developer experience, but she is going to talk later in the week about her experience with MLOps in Databricks and how she is able to kind of turn the platform into the way that she thinks it should work. I do really recommend going and having a look at her talk if this is something that you have been struggling with. All right, let's head back to some positivity. I will say I have been blown away by the Databricks assistant, and this has been my guilty pleasure for quite some time. I make a lot of demos with features that I might be unfamiliar with, and this allows me to power through at speed that I never would have thought is possible, candidly. So getting started is a lot easier when it's just something that you kind of know, but you've kind of forgotten, but you'll know it when you see it. It's also fantastic for understanding my co-workers' code. Given that they're all more talented than me, I can now learn what they've done rather than teaching their code as like a no-touching zone. The contextual element is also very good as well. There are times when I've been doing demos, but it starts giving spoilers to the demos because the recommendations are just so good. Something that is a little bit kind of hit and miss is the error handling. Most of the time it's okay. Sometimes it does need kind of 2 or 3 times to mash it to kind of bully it into the correct answer. And as much as I'm dunking on this, I do occasionally work on other platforms which don't have this button to kind of like fix your code if an error comes up. And I must say, when that button is gone, I really, really miss it. But the biggest miss for me is, unfortunately, it's not great when it comes to brand new features. And as someone who's using it generally in the very, very early stages of a brand new feature coming out, it tends not to be too great at kind of learning about these things. But with all that in mind, I really do recommend that you go see Gal and Samantha's talk about the assistant and what's in there. I have seen this talk before. Originally, I saw it on the agenda. I thought it was going to be a little bit Mickey Mouse. I hope they're not offended, or they don't watch this talk. But ultimately, I thought it was going to be, I don't know, a little bit simple, like how to click a button, how hard can it be? I realized I was missing out on so many of the features of the assistant. There were many things that I didn't realize you could do. I do recommend that you go and have a look, and you can learn about all the things that it's doing. So for example, it can now optimize your code as well, which is pretty impressive. Again, is it going to give you the perfect configs in the world? No. But it can point out those things that are a little bit silly that you might have done that you might not have realized, and will help you optimize your code. And again, all it is just mashing a button. So I will recommend heading to that one. Okay then, next one, very ugly, Databricks runtime upgrades. Can I actually do a bit of an audience poll at this moment? For those of you who have done a Databricks runtime upgrade, can I get a hand up if it took you more than a year to get that done? Yeah, we've got a few. And more than 9 months? No one? Okay, more than 6? All right, 3 months or around that amount? Okay, not very many hands have gone up, so hands up if you've never done this before and everything's still on like DBR 7.5. Okay. I can see from your expressions here, we are on the same page. Like, it's an absolute faff. It takes time away from other projects, and it's also annoying to justify from an ROI perspective. You then have to kind of like explain to upper management, yes, I want to upgrade, especially for those of you who are taking more than a year to be able to upgrade. You really do need like a big investment to get this done. So what if I told you there was a new way to manage runtime that took less effort and was less error prone? Spoilers, it does involve using serverless, but there is so much clever work going on underneath to do with environment manage, to do with issue remediation, to do with error handling, that give you the latest features with the least amount of work. And so that I'm going to recommend this talk. Justin Breeze, who is the brainchild behind it, breaking up with Spark version. So if you've put your hand up and it takes 9 months or more, I really recommend giving this a look. Will this solve every single thing? No. Will it make that process significantly quicker? Absolutely, yes. Now, my next talk has got absolutely nothing to do with Databricks at all. I just wanted to give it a mention because I thought it would be funny. And that is professional funny lady, comedian Erin Staples is joining us this week to talk about LLMs and comedy. As someone who believes that every aspect of life should contain a little bit of comedy, I agree that there is now an opportunity to scale this with LLMs. But as comedy is so subjective, this makes evals quite tricky, and that's what she's going to be talking about. I can't actually attend this one, and I'm gutted. Out of all the talks that I'm going to sit and watch at home by myself later, this is probably going to be high up on the list for me. Okay, bad table format wars. I have to be a little bit careful what I say here, because there is an enormous amount of work that has gone on in the open source communities. And I do not want to denigrate that kind of work in any way, shape, or form, especially as there's so many people who are like contributing graciously with their time to these projects. But from a customer's perspective, it looks something like this. So step one is pick your tribe. You pick the one that the sales guy told you probably. You just hope that you don't really need the other one. Then you give up and go with Excel. Wait, no. But let's be really honest. Of all the kind of table format projects that are going on, they are trying to solve very similar problems. The feature requests that are coming from their users look very similar. And over time, these two projects, or three projects I should say, are getting closer and closer together. And so to talk about that, who better than some of our ex-Tabular guys who joined us at Databricks this time last year for the future of open table formats, Delta, Iceberg, and more. So I really recommend having a look at this one. Again, this one's probably going to be one that might be booked out quite quickly, but this one is definitely worth camping out for. Okay, now onto some good things. And I couldn't put a QR code here for each of these as there are so many customer stories, but I went through pretty much all 700 talks and I had a look at some of the names that I know are speaking. I know the work that they're doing is either very interesting, it's either a novel approach to using Databricks. If you are working in a particular industry and you see some names up here that you think are kind of relevant to what you're doing, then give it a go. But I would also encourage you, if you don't have very specific industry needs, do also go and have a look at some other things that are maybe outside of your industry. Obviously, if you've got to deal with the kind of like high privacy data, there are other ways to see that. But I would encourage you to have a look at other industries this week as well. I've done something like 40 customer Databricks projects so far, and once you're like ripping up and looking into the guts of Databricks and how the platform works, it tends to not necessarily matter too much about the industry specific. So also for every single advert, there also should be a talk associated with it. So as you're going around, you should either be able to find a talk or maybe a blog for them as well. Okay, and the next one is kind of awkward because it's redacted. I can't tell you how good this session is going to be, but it's obviously up here for a reason. And here is the abstract for the session. In this session, you will learn about how data engineers can build intelligent applications on Databricks with production-level concurrency and simplified operations. We'll walk through reference architectures and example use cases while unlocking new possibilities of AI and analytics. How clandestine! What intrigue! If only someone knew what this was about. So sign up now. This is pretty dud at the moment because it's incredibly vague and no one really knows what this talk is. I highly recommend you scan this and you sign up for this talk. I have a suspicion, maybe a mere hunch, that later this week, this is going to be one of the most popular sessions of the entire week. So you've got the scoop, sign up, make sure that you can attend. Speaking of things like that, we've also got ultimately the best thing, and that is the keynotes. I know what we're announcing this year. They are definitely worth attending. I appreciate they are like 2-3 hours in the morning, and that can be quite big. If you are someone who cannot sit still for 3 hours, I feel you, I've got that as well, then I recommend dialing in. There's a virtual experience. You can dial in with your phone and you can watch that remotely if you wanted to sit in your hotel room and watch it rather than sit in the room for 3 hours. But if you do come, the atmosphere is absolutely electric. I do recommend it. And again, the announcements are just absolutely phenomenal this year. And of course, finally, to cap us off today, the absolute peak of Databricks is, of course, the Databricks podcast that I run. This is the podcast where Nick and I take our favorite features from the last 30 days and we try to shoehorn them into a single architecture. Is this realistic? No. Will you learn something? Maybe. And we are doing a live recording, including many of the features from the open source communities from Spark, Delta, and MLflow. It'll be fun, and you might even learn something. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you very much for coming to this talk. I hope you have a wonderful time at Data and AI Summit, and I'll see you around.